All right.
We are live.
Oh boy.
It's
Or
alive!
You've made it through the entire month. It is now the apex of spooky season. Welcome!
Does anybody in chat remember where we left off?
Yeah, we were having a whole discussion about this before we actually started streaming, trying to remember who read the last story last week, and none of us, not one single one of us, could remember.
We've all slept a lot since then.
Yeah.
I've slept, but not a lot.
Also, Jonas will not be joining us tonight. We have officially kicked him out of the Roo Croo for that milk story last week.
I drank him.
I hope he enjoyed his milk.
You drank his milkshake?
Yeah, it brought me to
no.
the yard.
Come on, it was a milk blood. He had milk blood in him.
Milk blood, milk duds, same thing, really. But no, Jonas will eventually be rejoining us. We just don't know when. And yeah, that's one of the issues that the VOD got deleted. Speaking of which, I'm gonna say it right now before I forget. Whoever our unofficial YouTube archivist is, can you please contact me on like Twitter or something like that? Send me a Twitter DM. My main Twitter is StokerBat. I want to talk to you about, because I saw that you had the VOD before we ran into the issue with it. I'd like to get the original VOD from you and then see what I can do about salvaging it for removing the parts that got it taken down in the first place. So yeah, give me a DM. I also want to say, while it was up, I really enjoyed the thumbnail that you created for it, because I've really been getting a kick out of the thumbnails you've been making for these Roo Croo Midnight Society videos.
Nice.
They're quite excellent.
Mm-hmm.
Especially since so many of them involve googers.
Okay, that's it. Get out. Get out. Every lady cat that I know of is going to be coming after you now.
Listen. Like my mom always used to say, when life hands you googers, you make googerade.
Out.
So, Twitch might still restore the VODs, but the one from the 17th is going to have to go down the moment that it comes back up, because that was the one that contained the specific offending creepypasta. There were 3, and I made an agreement with the guy. He was very generous about this. So long as I plug him in this stream right here. The
long and the short of it is that we accidentally copyrighted material without realizing it.
Yes. The stuff that he did on his own, he's just letting us... He just let us have to read out loud, but there was one that was specifically a commission for somebody else who was very particular about it not being read out loud by anybody, I guess, forever at any point. So that's the one that was the sticking point. But other than that, I'll just put the guy's link in chat, timothysprague.com. He wrote some very good creepypastas, of course, because we read 3 of them.
Yeah, we didn't even realize we'd picked 3 from the same guy. That's what got me.
Timothy Sprague.
Yes.
Oh, it is Sprague, not
yes.
Sprague?
Yeah. Timothy
Sprague.
Sprague.
Okay.
Timothy Sprague. Okay.
Let's not be vague. It's Timothy Sprague.
Man, I was going to
Go
say
read
that.
him today.
Or else get egged.
Yes.
Okay.
See, I'm a poet without the awareness of it. Anyway, alright, since we have no fuck-mothering idea which one of us went first.
It was somewhere in the middle. We were somewhere in the middle.
Let's roll a dice on it.
How do we want to handle the order of our thingamawatsing?
I mean, I guess we could just start over from the beginning again.
So start with GC and then go down.
Yes.
You
All
know,
right.
set up. All right.
Then I'm going to mute myself.
All right. And so I submit disapproval of the Midnight Society. The handprint. This happened at my friend's house a couple years ago. It was the first time she'd thrown a big party like this for Halloween. A couple of my friends and I ended up spending the night because no one was in any shape or mood to drive home at 2 in the morning. We crashed in her living room. The house was small and only had one floor. The living room was there to the right of the front door, lots of windows, and a big pond out in the front. Everything else is an empty field. Adjacent to the living room was the dining room and the kitchen, and to the left of it you got your classic creepy hallway complete with an old dusty mirror at the end of it. There were about 7 of us total sitting in the living room when all of a sudden my friend stopped, claiming she heard noise. So, she and another one of the guests went down the hall to have a look at the rest of us continue to doze off. That was until they came running out, shutting the curtains and turning off as many lights as they could. They urged us to do the same. We shut out all the curtains and turned off every light in the house, save for a couple of flashlights. That's when our lovely hostess started handing out steak and butcher knives for protection. At this point, the rest of us just wanted to understand just what the fuck got them up so upset. Apparently, they got halfway down the hall but one of them noticed a moment in the corner of their eye, or movement in the corner of their eye. She looked into the office, the first door on the right, with the face one faced the front of the house, and there was a handprint on the window. This would only seem a little odd, but the handprint was on the outside the window, and had never been there before. Mind you, this is a small house, and we were partying all over the place. Someone had to have been outside in the last 10 or 20 minutes to make it, and the only other problem was that the window in question was elevated 2 meters off the floor. As far as I'm concerned, no one at the party was 2.5 meters tall. By now, all of us thoroughly freaked out about the fresh handprint, except for me. Me, being oddly disinterested in freaky shit, went outside to see the handprint. That's when I realized how tall you actually had to be to make a handprint at the top of the window like that. I figured no one else had noticed it yet, and besides, scaring people who are holding steak and knives is a stupid idea. I went back to check on everyone, and they considered calling the cops, but the house wasn't made with a working landline, causing the reception to go to shit. I decided to calm everyone down, tried to convince them that some guy got proper plastered and just hopped up and slapped the window like that. Since no one had considered the height of the window, they believed me all the way to the next morning. When everyone went to sleep at night, I didn't. I ended up staying the night because I knew that one thing that I hadn't told anybody. I knew the truth. And I think I should be awake in case there was a break-in. I had to use the bathroom earlier tonight, and I found a similar hand on the bathroom window, which happened to be at least half a meter right than the one on the other one I found. And when I walked outside, I realized that half of the windows on the front of the house had handprints. But to this day, I think I'm the only one who had discovered that. And that's it.
Oh, that was a short one.
Yeah.
Short but sweet and creepy.
Oh,
I don't know why I said it like that.
pants.
That was extremely short.
Yeah, I
But
thought
fairly effective.
Oh, well,
Fairly effective. I like the concept.
we still might come around to GC again, so.
Yeah. Little do they know that those handprints were actually made by Stretch Armstrong.
I
Nice.
really thought you were going to say made by Googers, honestly.
You led right in with it. You were
listen,
like right out the
listen.
gate.
Eat him.
Listen. Everybody knows that Googers don't have hands.
Wait a minute. Yeah. I got claws.
Okay.
All right.
Moving on to Miffix.
Epics.
I got a spunky, fresh little one submitted
Oh,
for
boy.
the approval of the Midnight Society. I submit bad juju with garlic butter. See those little ones right there? Kayla's dad asked, pressing his finger against the icy glass in the tank, watching her reflection nod excitedly from behind him. Those are called crawfish. The big ones are called lobsters. Oh, Kayla said. Well, why are they in there? Kayla's dad stretching his back, drumming his fingers along the tank. 'Cause some people like to eat them, he said. Kayla's little face drooped. But why are they gonna eat them? She asked, scooting closer to the tank, enough for her nose to feel the chill from the glass. Because they taste yummy, that's all, sweetie. But they don't do anything bad. They didn't do anything bad, did they? No, Kayla's dad said, bending in on a knee to face her at eye level. They're nice animals, just sometimes just because they're nice doesn't mean they can't be food. Chickens are nice, but you love chicken nuggets, right? The disheartened girl nodded to her father. Come on, let's go back to Mom, he said, scooping up his daughter in his arms and carrying her back to the table. It was a quaint little Cajun place off the main highway. Not too shabby, limited seating, but good food. Places like these always draw in eccentrics from every walk of life. A case in point, the table directly across from Michaela's family was two middle-aged men munching down on shrimp. I'm just saying, you shouldn't jump to conclusions. Maybe Bryce had no idea it was spiked. Yes, he did. I'm telling you, that man's trouble. Jordan dunked another shrimp back into the cocktail sauce, sucking it down. Well then, let's rough him up. The man's got 10 fingers and 10 toes. Daryl shook his head, sipping on his Bloody Mary and wagging his finger. I don't know, man. That's some seriously bad juju. The hell is your juice? You don't... Daryl stopped himself from another headache. Juju's like, if you do bad, you get bad. You get me? So, like, karma? Yeah, like karma. Then just say karma. It's not exactly the same, but fine. Point is, if we're gonna rack up some bad juju, we gotta balance it out with some good juju. Jordan stopped midway through plucking his fingers with his mouth. Like what? Like, I don't know, do something good. As Daryl finished his thought, their waiter walked by. Excuse me, Jordan called out. Yes, sir? The waiter replied. Cancel my lobster with garlic butter. I'm gonna do a house salad instead. Yes, sir. The waiter nodded, walking away. Daryl raised an eyebrow at his associate. The hell was that about? Well, you said do something good. I just saved some poor little lobster from getting boiled alive. You're welcome. They can't feel it, Jordy. Says who? You ask a lobster. Daryl rolled his eyes until they were caught on the small family seated across from them. He grinned intently when he noticed Kayla's mom. Jordan, being a nosy prick, caught on to exactly what was racing through Daryl's mind. Don't even start, bro. What? I know you just don't. Just try one little bite, please. For me, Kayla's mom said. Kayla shook her head profusely. Her dad leaned in forward and swallowed the entire spoon of Mom's gumbo. You're missing out, sweetie. Does that have lobster in it? Kayla said. Her mom darted a look at her dad. Yes, honey. Do you not want to try any lobster? They killed him, Kayla protested. Who? Kayla's mom asked. The lobster, she frowned. Her dad let out a sigh. Oh, Kayla. That's just the cycle of life, sweetie. It's okay. Lots of people eat animals. Like dogs? No, not dogs. So, can we get one? What, a dog? Absolutely not, her mom said. Dogs are far too much money. We've talked about this. Like $1 million? Not a million, but a lot. Kayla nodded, but looked over at the tank full of lobsters and crawfish. How much is a lobster, then? Kayla questioned. You want to try one? We can split it. They're like $30. That's not $1 million, Kayla said. Her mother shot a look at her father. Wait, you mean you want one as a pet? Kayla nodded. I'll take really good care of him, I promise. I don't, her mother started, but noticed the genuine innocence of her daughter's petition. Well, we don't even have a tank. That's okay. He can sleep in the bath. No, her dad started. We'll get a tank for him, he smiled, turned to his wife, and ushering over the waiter. Daryl and Jordan watched as the waiter came over, escorted the family over to the lobster tank, and picked out the biggest lobster there was. The hell? Look, Daryl interrupted, pointing at the squirming crustacean. It's your lunch, he broke out, laughing. They're taking a live one home? You know how much that costs? Daryl nodded, eyeing them as they helped their daughter pick to pick up the heavy box loaded with the live critter. It's a shit ton of money. Those people must be loaded as hell. Yeah, Jordan said, staring down at his half-eaten house salad. You know there's more where that came from. Daryl looked at Jordan, who was already giving him the look. They knew what they were about to do. The ride home was bumpy. No more than usual, of course, but for a live lobster, it was the longest car ride of its existence. And for its new owner, it was the anticipation of a lifetime. A first pet being brought home. Mom, can he eat chocolate? Kayla said, pulling a tiny M&M from between the car seats. No, I don't think so, baby, she said, turning to her daughter. What's his name, anyways? Kayla thought for a long minute, listening to the large lobster tap around in the car boat on her lap. As she listened, her father began twisting the radio dial, turning up the song that was playing. Rock Lobster by the B-52s. You remember this one, Kay? Her dad asked from the front seat. This song's from when Daddy was young. Rock Lobster, it's called. He smiled, and that's when Kayla lit up with an idea. Rocky! I'll call him Rocky. Good idea, the mom replied. Little did Kayla, her mom, dad, or Rocky know that tailing just behind them in a black SUV was Daryl and Jordan. Too distracted by the new pet, the unsuspecting family had no idea that harm was coming for them. This blissful ignorance, though, would soon run out. How's Rocky doing, sweetie? Good, Kayla muttered, peering over the side of her bed into the bucket filled with homemade salt water, listening to Rocky clinking around against the plastic. That's good. You're being a very good mommy to him, but now it's time to let him rest. And you too. Tomorrow, Daddy said he'll take you to the pet store to get a tank, okay? Okay, Kayla said, nestling into her bed. I love you, her mother said, kissing her forehead. I love you too, Mommy, Kayla said with a yawn, closing her eyes and squeezing tightly onto the rubber band from Rocky's claw. Kayla awoke to a thud. Too loud to be Rocky. Maybe it was Dad. Dad? She called out. No response. Dad? She said again, a bit louder this time. Then, from behind her, a hairy hand covered her mouth tightly, index finger pressing against the lips. Shh, Daryl whispered into the girl's ear. Don't make any loud noises, okay? I don't want to have to hurt you or your daddy or your mommy, all right? Jordan suppressed his laugh as he approached Daryl's side, pulling a piggy bank from Kayla's dresser. Daryl turned to watch him quietly yank on the cord wedged inside of it. Wow, Daryl hushed. You just hit the fucking mother lode right there. Oh, shh, Jordan snapped. You gonna curse in front of the kid, talk about that, Juju. He rolled his eyes. Man, we're stealing from him. It's gonna take a hell of a lot of good juju to make up for this. I'm gonna have to start going back to church. Yeah, but worth it, Jordan said, watching wads of rolled up bills fall into his palm from the piggy bank. The clinking of Rocky within the bucket caused Kayla to squirm in her bed, letting out a soft and muffled groan. Daryl's grip tightened. Shut up, kid. Don't wake up your folks. I don't want to have to fucking kill him, okay? Daryl looked from the girl to the bucket, pulling out the M9 and waving it in front of her face and tapping his finger on the trigger. He leaned over the bed and shot a glance into the bucket. Jordan! Jordan! He snappily whispered. What? Jordan barked. Your lunch. It's in the bucket. The lobster? Daryl nodded, chuckling to himself while shaking his head. They didn't even eat the damn thing. Who keeps a lobster as a pet? Jordan laughed under his breath. We'd be better off to eat the fucking thing. Search the other rooms. When we leave, we'll take the lobster and crack into it tonight. A celebratory dinner, huh? Jordan nodded, creaking open the Kayla's bedroom door and creeping down the hallway. And that's when Kayla's mother entered the scene. She gasped, clapping her hands over her mouth before she took a step back, followed by two defensive ones towards her daughter's room. Don't hurt her, please, she gasped. My husband. Your husband, Jordan interrupted, ain't gonna do shit. He waved the gun in her face. Now at this point, hearing the light commotion, Daryl emerged from the doorway in Kayla's room, focusing through the darkness on Kayla's mom. He grinned. Please, we'll do anything. We have money. Oh, we know you have money, Jordan said. But how about we talk about this anything you mentioned, Daryl hissed. Yes, anything, just don't hurt her. Daryl grinned. You and I have very different definitions of anything. Growing tired of Daryl, Jordan poked his head into the parents' bedroom, noting the still sleeping husband mouth agape. He crept in, opening drawers and cabinets, eventually finding Mr. Kayla's dad's wallet. He shook his head in disappointment, returning to the hallway where Daryl was bothering the mother again, gun pressed against her belly with one hand and removing her wedding band with the other. Call it superstition. But Daryl wouldn't nibble on a married woman like this, at least one with a band still on. It's a bust, Jordan croaked. They don't have shit. I got the dad's wallet. Can't you see I'm busy? Busy or not, there's nothing here to pay Bryce, Jordan said, flipping through the billfold. I don't give a rat's ass about Bryce. That shit's ours, Daryl said, letting go of the woman and taking the wallet in his hands. Jordan shrugged by him and approached the woman. Who'd you see here tonight? He demanded. The woman caught his eyes and caught on. Nobody. Good answer. Jordan, Daryl said, shoving the wallet in his pocket. Don't forget our dinner, he said, nodding to Kayla's room. Jordan agreed, and with a quick trot into the room, he lifted the bucket and glanced over to the little girl. Don't worry, he said. Your little buddy here's in good hands. The ride back to their apartment was bumpy, accentuated by the sloshing of salt water coming from within the bucket clenched between Daryl's thighs. It was still a long drive ahead, and the pair realized that the family at this point had likely called the cops, meaning they were on a tight window for getting the hell out of Dodge. Jordan pressed on. Through the fog made it difficult to see through the chilled glass. You could say that the pair was now trapped in a tank of their own, of sorts. Certainly not the one of the local Cajun place, but one nonetheless. Daryl stared at his reflection in the glass, holding up his hand, dressed in the woman's wedding band. The hell is that? Jordan said, noticing the shine of the thing. Nothing, Daryl said dismissively. Is that the lady's wedding ring? Yeah, Daryl nodded. Nice, Jordan replied. That's a few grand right there. Let me see it. Daryl nodded, pulling the ring from his finger, extending it towards Jordan. As he did, however, a thud from underneath the car sent the slippery, sweaty ring right into the bucket. It was Rocky's ring now. Oh, shit, Daryl said, looking into the bucket. Get it, Jordan snapped, before that thing eats it or some shit. Daryl plunged his hand into the icy water, fishing around for the ring. Got it! As he pinched the ring, Rocky the lobster found a score of his own, clasping down onto Daryl's index finger and cracking straight through the bone to the other side, leaving nothing but a dangling wad of flesh to squirm around in the blood-filled water. Daryl shrieked in agony, obviously as the lobster tightened its grip, forcing his other hand to go plunging into the bloodbath and pulling the large lobster's claw apart. Holy shit, Jordan shouted, turning to face Daryl and gripping the steering wheel hard. Daryl, what the fuck? And that's when everything went dark. Do the math. 70, maybe 75 miles an hour on the highway, plus one really pissed off lobster, equals 2 crooks in the side of a northern oak. Jordan lifted his blood-spattered head from the glass-covered steering wheel, trying his best to forcefully focus onto Daryl. Daryl? He shouted through the pain. Daryl? Daryl was alive, though not for long, but had too much blood in the mouth to speak. He spit it out into the dash as he grit his teeth. Bad Juju was all he could sputter. Jordan shook his head against the glass with the rest of his strength. No, man. There ain't no Juju. We did this shit to ourselves. Jordan dropped right then and there. The police arrived at the scene shortly after. They were already on the pair's trail, when they found 3/4 of an SUV mounted into an oak tree. It was safe to assume they'd found them. It was an odd scene, to say the least. 4 pounds of spiked meth under the back seat, a coating of blood-laced salt water on the floor, a wedding band and a severed finger resting underneath the passenger seat, and, of course, a lobster named Rocky, still very much alive in the back seat and just maybe feeling minimal pain. And that was Bad Juju with Garlic Butter by MakRalston.
What a good lobster.
That was a very silly story.
What a good lobster. I hope that when they get him home, he gets extra lobster treats.
I don't even know what lobster
Lobster.
treats would be. I would imagine it would be like some sort of algae pellet type thing or something.
Just Boxer asking, West Lobster form when?
Yes, we all
Yes.
need Lobster West.
I'm here for it.
I am too. Do
Yes.
it, Rick. Next Halloween.
The council has voted. Rick's like, don't I get a vote? And we're like, no.
Fans demand it.
Alright, so I guess
On
now...
a funny note, he's in a pot.
Yes. Also, it is very much disputed whether or not lobsters can feel pain. People thought for years they didn't have a complicated enough nervous system to feel it, but nowadays they're starting to think they actually do. So,
They are animals,
anyway, I think it's
after all.
Miller's.
I mean,
yeah,
it'd be kind of
I mean, yeah.
weird.
Scientists are always like, well, I don't know, blah, 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 but then it turns out blah, 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 blah.
That's exactly how science works.
It is. Anyway, I think it's Miller's turn.
It is Miller's turn.
Yes, it is my turn. I would like to present for the enjoyment of the Menace Society, Hypnos by H.P. Lovecraft. This quote is accredited to Baudelaire. Apropos of sleep, that sinister adventure of all our nights, we may say that men go to bed daily with an audacity that would be incomprehensible if we did not know that it is the result of ignorance of the danger. May the merciful gods, if indeed there be such, guard these hours when no power of the will or drug that the cunning of man devises can keep me from the chasm of sleep. Death is merciful, for there is no return therefrom, but with him who has come back out of the nethermost chambers of night, haggard and knowing, peace rests nevermore. Fool that I was to plunge with such unsanctioned frenzy into mysteries no man was meant to penetrate. Fool or god that he was, my only friend, who had led me and went before me, and who in the end passed into terrors which may yet be mine. We met, I recall, in a railway station, where he was the center of a crowd of the vulgarly curious. He was unconscious, having fallen in a kind of convulsion which imparted to his slight black-clad body a strange rigidity. I think he was then approaching 40 years of age, for there were deep lines in the face, wan and hollow-cheeked, but oval and actually beautiful, and touches of gray in the thick waving hair and small full beard which had once been of the deepest raven black. His brow was white as the marble of Pentelicus, and of a height and breadth almost godlike. I said to myself with all the ardor of a sculptor that this man was a fawn statue out of antique Hellas, dug from a temple's ruin and brought somehow to life in our stifling age, only to feel the chill and pressure of devastating years. And when he opened his immense, sunken, and widely luminous black eyes, I knew he would be thenceforth my only friend, the only friend of one who had never possessed a friend before. For I saw that such eyes must have looked fully upon the grandeur and the terror of realms beyond normal consciousness and reality. Realms which I had cherished in fancy, but vainly sought. So as I drove the crowd away, I told him he must come home with me, and be my teacher and leader in unfathomed mysteries, and he assented without speaking a word. Afterward I found that his voice was music, the music of deep viols, and of crystalline spheres. We talked often in the night, and in the day, when I chiseled busts of him and carved miniature heads in ivory to immortalize his different expressions. Of our studies it is impossible to speak, since they held so slight a connection with anything of the world as living men conceive it. They were of that vaster and more appalling universe of dim entity and consciousness which lies deeper than matter, time, and space, and whose existence we suspect only in certain forms of sleep. Those rare dreams beyond dreams, which come never to common men, and but once or twice in the lifetime of imaginative men. The cosmos of our waking knowledge, born from such a universe as a bubble, is born from the pipe of a jester, touches it only as such a bubble may touch its sardonic source when sucked back by the gesture's whim. Men of learning suspect it little and ignore it mostly. Wise men have interpreted dreams, and the gods have laughed. One man with oriental eyes has said that all time and space are relative, and men have laughed. But even that man with oriental eyes has done no more than suspect. I had wished and tried to do more than suspect, and my friend has tried and partly succeeded. Then we both tried together, and with exotic drugs, courted terrible and forbidden dreams in the tower studio chamber of the old manor house in Hoary Kent. Among the agonies of these days is that chief of torments, inarticulateness. What I learned and saw in those hours of impious exploration can never be told, for want of symbols or suggestions in any language. I say this because from first to last our discoveries partook only of the nature of sensations. Sensations correlated with no impression which the nervous system of normal humanity is capable of receiving. They were sensations, yet within them lay unbelievable elements of time and space, things which at bottom possessed no distinct and definite existence. Human utterance can best convey the general character of our experiences by calling them plungings or soarings. For in every period of revelation, some part of our minds broke boldly away from all that is real and present, rushing airily along shocking, unlighted, and fear-haunted abysses, and occasionally tearing through certain well-marked and typical obstacles, describable only as vicious, uncouth clouds or vapors. In these black and bodiless flights, we were sometimes alone and sometimes together. When we were together, my friend was always far ahead. I could comprehend his presence despite the absence of form by a species of pictorial memory whereby his face appeared to me, golden from a strange light and frightful with its weird beauty, its anomalously youthful cheeks, its burning eyes, its Olympian brow, and its shadowing hair and growth of beard. Of the progress of time, we kept no record, for time had become to us the merest illusion. I know only, though, that there must have been something very singular involved, since we came at length to marvel why we did not grow old. Our discourse was unholy, and always hideously ambitious. No god or daemon would have aspired to discoveries and conquests like those which we planned in whispers. I shiver as I speak of them and dare not be explicit, though I will say that my friend once wrote on paper a wish which he dare not utter with his tongue, which made me burn the paper and look affrightedly out of the window at the spangled night sky. I will hint, only hint, that he had designs which involved the rulership of the visible universe and more. Designs whereby the earth and the stars would move at his command, and the destinies of all living things be his. I affirm, I swear, that I had no share in these extreme aspirations. Anything my friend may have said or written to the contrary must be erroneous, for I am no man of strength to risk the unmentionable warfare in unmentionable spheres by which alone one might achieve success. There was a night when winds from unknown spaces whirled us irresistibly into limitless vacua beyond all thought and entity. Perceptions of the most maddeningly untransmissible sort thronged upon us. Perceptions of infinity which at the time convulsed us with joy, which are now partly lost to my memory, and partly incapable of presentation to others. Vicious obstacles were clawed through in rapid succession, and at length I felt that we had been borne to realms of greater remoteness than any we had previously known. My friend was vastly in advance as we plunged into this awesome ocean of virgin ether, and I could see the sinister exultation on his floating luminous, too youthful memory face. Suddenly, that face became dim and quickly disappeared, and in a brief space, I found myself projected against an obstacle which I could not penetrate. It was like the others, yet incalculably denser, a sticky, clammy mass, if such terms could be applied to analogous qualities in a non-material sphere. I felt, been halted by a barrier which my friend and leader had successfully passed. Struggling anew, I came to the end of the drug dream and opened my physical eyes to the tower's studio, in whose opposite corner reclined the pallid and still unconscious form of my fellow dreamer, weirdly haggard and wildly beautiful as the moon shed gold-green light on his marble features. Then, after a short interval, the form in the corner stirred, and may pitying heaven keep from my sight and sound another thing like that which took place before me. I cannot tell you how he shrieked, or what vistas of unvisitable hells gleamed for a second in black eyes crazed with fright. I can only say that I fainted, and did not stir till he himself recovered and shook me in his frenzy for someone keep away the horror and desolation. That was the end of our voluntary searchings in the caverns of dream. Awed, shaken, and portentous, my friend who had been beyond the barrier warned me that we must never venture within those realms again. What he had seen, he dared not tell me, but he said from his wisdom that we must sleep as little as possible, even if drugs were necessary to keep us awake. That he was right I soon learned from the unutterable fear which engulfed me whenever consciousness lapsed. After each short and inevitable sleep I seemed older, whilst my friend aged with a rapidity almost shocking. It is hideous to see wrinkles form and hair whiten almost before one's eyes. Our mode of life was now totally altered. Heretofore a recluse so far as I know, his true name and origin never having passed his lips. My friend now became frantic in his fear of solitude. At night, he would not be alone, nor would the company of a few persons calm him. His sole relief was attained in revelry of the most general and boisterous sort, so that few assemblies of the young and the gay were unknown to us. Our appearance and age seemed to excite in most cases a ridicule, which I keenly resented, but which my friend considered a lesser evil than solitude. Especially was he afraid to be out of doors alone when the stars were shining, and if forced to this condition he would often glance furtively at the sky, as if hunted by some monstrous thing therein. He did not always glance at the same place in the sky. It seemed to be a different place, at different times. On spring evenings it would be low in the northeast, in the summer it would be nearly overhead, in the autumn it would be in the northwest, in winter it would be in the east, but mostly if in the small hours of the morning. Midwinter evenings seemed less dreadful to him. Only after 2 years did I connect this fear with anything in particular, but then I began to see that he must be looking at a special spot on the celestial vault, whose position at different times corresponded to the direction of his glance. A spot roughly marked by the constellation Corona Borealis. We now had a studio in London, never separating, but never discussing the days when we had sought to plumb the mysteries of the unreal world. We were aged and weak from our drugs, dissipations, and nervous overstrain, and the thinning hair and beard of my friend had become snow white. Our freedom from long sleep was surprising, for seldom did we succumb more than an hour or two at a time to the shadow which had now grown so frightful a menace. Then came one January of fog and rain, when money ran low and drugs were hard to buy. My statues and ivory heads were all sold, and I had no means to purchase new materials, or energy to fashion them even had I possessed them. We suffered terribly, and on a certain night my friend sank into a deep breathing sleep, from which I could not awaken him. I can recall the scene now, the desolate, pitch-black garret studio under the eaves with the rain beating down, ticking of the lone clock, the fancied ticking of our watches as they rested on the dressing table, the creaking of some swaying shutter in a remote part of the house, certain distant city noises muffled by fog and space, and worst of all, the deep, steady, sinister breathing of my friend on the couch. A rhythmical breathing which seemed to measure moments of supernal fear and agony for his spirit as it wandered in spheres forbidden, unimagined, and hideously remote. The tension of my vigil became oppressive, and a wild train of trivial impressions and associations thronged through my almost unhinged mind. I heard a clock strike somewhere, not ours, for that was not a striking clock, and my morbid fancy found in this a new starting point for idle wanderings. Clocks. time, space, infinity, and then my fancy reverted to the local as I reflected that even now, beyond the roof, and the fog, and the rain, and the atmosphere, Corona Borealis was rising in the northeast. Corona Borealis, which my friend had appeared to dread, and whose scintillant semicircle of stars must now be glowing unseen through the measureless abysses of ether. All at once, my feverishly sensitive ears seemed to detect a new and wholly distinct component in the soft medley of drug-magnified sounds. A low and damnably insistent whine from very far and away. Groaning, clamoring, mocking, calling from the northeast. But it was not that distant whine which robbed me of my faculties and set upon my soul such a seal of fright as may never in life be removed. Not that which drew the shrieks and excited the convulsions which caused lodgers and police to break down my door. It was not what I heard, but what I saw. For in that dark, locked, shuttered, and curtained room there appeared from the black northeast corner a shaft of horrible red gold light. A shaft which bore with it no glow to disperse the darkness, but which streamed only upon the recumbent head of the troubled sleeper, bringing out in hideous duplication the luminous and strangely youthful memory face, as I had known it in dreams of abysmal space and unshackled time, when my friend had pushed behind the barrier to those secret, innermost, and forbidden caverns of nightmare. And as I look, I beheld the head rise, the black, liquid, and deep-sunken eyes open in terror, and the thin, shadowed lips part as if for a scream too frightful to be uttered. There dwelt in that ghastly, inflexible face, as it shone bodiless, luminous, and rejuvenated in the blackness, more of stark, teeming, brain-shattering fear than all the rest of heaven and earth has ever revealed to me. No word was spoken amidst the distant sound that grew nearer and nearer, but as I followed the memory face's mad stare along that cursed shaft of light to its source, the source whence also the whining came, I too saw for an instant what it saw. It fell with ringing ears in that fit of shrinking and epilepsy which brought the lodgers and the police. Never could I tell, try as I might, what it actually was that I saw, nor could the still face tell. For although I must have seen more than I did, it will never speak again. But always I shall guard against the mocking and insatiate Hypnos, Lord of Sleep, against the night sky, and against the mad ambitions of knowledge and philosophy. Just what happened is unknown, for not only was my own mind unseated by this strange and hideous thing, but others were tainted with forgetfulness, which can mean nothing if not madness. They have said, I know not for what reason, that I never had a friend, but that art, philosophy, and insanity had filled all my tragic life. The lodgers and police on that night soothed me, and the doctor administered something to quiet me, nor did anyone see what a nightmare event had taken place. My stricken friend moved them to no pity, but what they found on the couch in the studio made them give me a praise which sickened me, and now a fame which I spurn in despair as I sit for hours, bald, gray-bearded, shriveled, palsied, drug-crazed, and broken, adoring and praying to the object they found. For they deny that I sold the last of my statuary, and point with ecstasy at the thing which the shining shaft of life left cold, petrified, and unvocal. It is all that remains of my friend, the friend who led me on to madness and wreckage. A godlike head of such marble as only Hellas could yield, young with the youth that is outside time, with beauteous bearded face, curved smiling lips, Olympian brow, and dense locks waving and poppy-crowned. They say that that haunting memory face is modeled from my own, as if it was at 25, but upon the marble base is carven a single name in the letters of Attica. Hypnos.
Well, we can add sleeping and stars to the list of things that Lovecraft was afraid of. Also, again, I know I said it in chat, but just listen to that man's description of that other man, whom he immediately invites into his house, and tell me that Howard Phillips was not a closet case.
Like, I'm reading that and I'm just like, man, this guy must have loved his poppers.
That's what the P stands for.
Alright, I'd like to hand things over to Rage now.
Yes. Let's hear what
Alright.
the Rage has to say.
So this one, for the approval of the Midnight Society, is called Don't Fear the Reaper, and there is no current author that I can tell. It's just by Anonymous. It was a cold October morning when my family just moved into the neighborhood. We finished unpacking the boxes and just wanted to relax and watch some television. Although, since we moved into the new neighborhood, my mom told me I had to go out and meet our neighbors and make some new friends. I denied, but she threatened to ground me for the weekend if I didn't do what she says. I know, great parenting. So after walking 3 blocks, I see someone around my age playing outside on his bike, and outside of what I'm guessing is his house. I decided to go up and introduce myself to him. Hey, I'm David. I'm new to the neighborhood. Nice to meet you. I'm the kid with said the kid with the pleasant tone. My name's Jackson. Where'd you move at? Just a couple of blocks down the street. Heh, that creepy-ass part of the neighborhood. Too much forest. Makes it seem like someone could come out of nowhere and scare the living piss out of you. Anyway, grab a bike. We can go downtown and grab something to bite to eat. Jackson was sure as hell right about it being creepy. When I walked down the part of the neighborhood, it felt like I was being watched by something. But I immediately brushed that off and grabbed one of Jackson's bikes and biked down to the downtown to the nearest food restaurant with Jackson. And then biked to his house, played video games with him until about 10 o'clock at night. My mom called, telling me to get home ASAP. We said our goodbyes, and I walked home alone. Those 3 blocks felt like 3 miles. The foliage made it so the road ahead of me was pitch black, making the environment around me feel eerie. After walking a whole block, I noticed something odd in the foliage. I swear to God, I saw a pair of eyes looking straight at me in the distance. I closed my eyes and rubbed them with my hands to check that I wasn't just seeing things. Right as I opened my eyes, they're gone. The next morning was when I had to start school. I did the usual things you do in the morning before school. Get ready, eat breakfast, pack my backpack, and I went outside. It was still very dark out with that eerie environment like last night. It made sense, though, since I got to my bus stop around 6:30. Seemed a bit early, but I didn't mind. As I'm walking down the dark road, I see a tall figure, at least 7 feet tall, walking oddly across the road with his head slanted downward and what looked like curved horns protruding from its forehead. I'm frozen in fear of what the hell it is could be. After a couple seconds of slowly walking, it stops and raises its head, turned toward me. It was standing a good 50 yards from me, and all I could see was its eyes, white as snow. I immediately faced the other way and ran faster than I had ever ran before. I ran on a different, much longer route to my bus stop. I checked my watch, and I was 5 minutes late to the bus stop. By the time I got there, the bus had just about to take off. Thankfully, the bus driver was kind enough to stop the bus so I could get on. During the whole day at school, I couldn't stop thinking about it. Whatever it was on the road by my house, I couldn't even start a conversation without wandering off, thinking about it. And besides that, nothing too unusual happened at school, nor when school ended, and when I hung out at Jackson's house the following day. But the worst was when I had to walk home from his house. It was about 8 o'clock and dark as last night. Except for the whole way home, I didn't see anything too strange besides the eeriness of the woods blanketing over the neighborhood. As I got home, I immediately got to bed, so I didn't feel tired tomorrow. But around 3 o'clock, I was awakened by a creaking sound in my room. As I got up, I noticed a tall figure at the end of my bed. But this time, I could see his features. He was wearing a black, ripped-up trench coat, tattered pants, and shirt, which was also black. His face was black and leathery with horns that could relate to the horns of a goat. Its eyes were terrifying. They were pale white, with no pigmentation, not even a pupil in sight. Its mouth was big and large, sharp, carnivorous teeth. Had a massive tongue that would lick its upper teeth as it had lusted for something. I was in immediate shock and shuddered, but asked, Who are you? It gave me a devilish smile and spoke to me in a demonic tone. Hush, child. No need to be scared. There's no need to fear the Reaper. I'm merely just stopping by to warn you. You should never travel the roads alone at night. We might not live to see the sunlight again. Not if I can sense fear inside you. It walked closer to me as I crawled into the corner frightened. And he stops about a foot in front of me and rests his hands on my forehead. I blacked out afterwards. All I remember was I woke up in my bed with blood on my hands and a red handprint on my forehead, nearly bleeding with a bloody nose also. After about a week, I couldn't even think straight. I avoided walking in the dark until I hung out at Jackson's during the weekend. As we were messing around playing video games, the power in the whole neighborhood went out in a matter of seconds. We were confused on why the power went out. Not a single transformer blew. There was nothing, no storm nearby. The only thing that really concerned me was we were in the dark. Oh God, this is bad, I said in fear. This is really bad. Jackson sighed and told me, Don't worry. It's not the end of the world. Well, do you have something like a flashlight that could light the room? Yeah, let me look for one. We eventually found a flashlight, but with the luck we had, the battery was dead. Thankfully, Jackson had a batch of fresh brand new batteries he bought from the store a couple days ago. We put the batteries in the flashlight, and it still didn't work. Damn piece of shit, Jackson said in frustration. This thing was always a piece of trash. I offered to use things like candles as we tried to use them, but all the lighters in the house wouldn't work. We even checked to see if they had fuel in them. We also tried the lights on our phones, but both batteries were dead, even though we had full battery beforehand. Then, out of nowhere, the flashlight turns on, even though the switch was off. My heart sank when I saw the flashlight was pointing to. From across the room, that demon that visited me that night. He opened his mouth, and out came a deafening screech. He charged at us. I hit the wall so hard that my vision started to blur, and I started to black out. When I woke, all I saw was the carcass of Jackson, his eyes and limbs missing. I started to vomit everywhere and tried to make myself get out of the house. When I walked downstairs, I see his parents dead with their eyes and limbs missing. I looked closely, and what I saw was life scarring. When I took a closer look at his mom, I could still see her breathing. I inched my way outside and headed home, my skin paler than a ghost. I don't know why it didn't kill me, but all I know is this. Never go outside in the dark. Always keep a light source with you, and always be prepared if there's a power outage in your neighborhood. And lastly, never show fear. Never fear the Reaper. Yeah,
This
that's
message has been brought to you by the Boy Scouts.
And the Grim Reaper.
Brought to you by Blue Oyster Cult.
Yeah, it felt a little bit like a PSA at the end there.
Grim Reaper.
That's what I was saying. That's
Always
what I was
be
saying.
prepared for a power outage. Be sure that you have emergency supplies ready in your closet.
Right, those 90s PSAs with like the little firefly or whatever. I remember those.
Oh yeah, he had the singy voice, and he was like, "Don't touch power lines, or you'll be fried crispy." Yeah, I remember him.
You're gonna be fried crispy.
All right, well, I
See,
guess
these guys say
it's-
that, and literally the only thing I can think of after hearing this story is the Blue Oyster Cult song.
Well, I mean, yes, everybody thinks of that when they hear this title.
See, the problem here is the flashlight was not the issue. They did not have enough cowbell.
See, nobody ever thinks of that.
Ding,
Bar
ding,
cowbell!
ding, 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 ding.
I've been to like, I don't even know how many exorcisms, and nobody ever brings the cowbell.
This is why things go wrong.
Exactly. If they'd had the cowbell with Emily Rose, it would have been different.
You know, imagine like you're like a cryptid like showing up to the meeting and like they're like, hey, you know, what was it like? What was it like? You know, your last kill, you gotta talk about it. And I'm like, yeah, no, this dude was aggressively playing cowbell at me. I couldn't do it.
Just no fear. Just looked at me dead in the face, just pounding the cowbell with a drumstick, walking right toward me. I was terrified.
Most fucked up thing I ever saw. He didn't even blink. He just kept walking toward me.
Menacing.
I think it's your turn, Rick.
It is my turn. This one is a creepypasta classic. Probably also going to be corny, but you know, it's creepypasta. This one is Pokemon Lost Silver. You see, I am a simple college student living alone in an apartment. I was very enthusiastic about the release of Pokemon Heart Gold / Soul Silver here in the States. I have purposely locked myself out of all media and the internet aside for school purposes. That means no 4chan, no /V, no Bulbapedia, etc. As I was busy with the school year and being poor at the time, I wasn't able to buy Soul Silver on its launch date. After my school year ended, I ordered Soul Silver from Amazon. However, it would take a week for it to arrive. I decided that during that time, I would replay my Crystal version on my Game Boy Color. However, I realized that long ago my mom threw it away because I told her the save went dead, and I was very upset about it then. She also threw away my Silver version, so all I have is my Game Boy Color. As such, I set out to GameStop and bought a used Silver version, as it's the only Pokemon game left that they have for the GBC. $10, fairly cheap. I went home and started it up for a nostalgia trip. However, that's when things started getting bizarre, and most likely the reason why you read this. The Game Freak logo started up as normal, but it just froze there. I thought the card was just errored or something, so I turned it off and on, and the same thing happened. Tried pressing A and start over and over and all the buttons. Eventually the logo vanished and there was a black screen for about 5 seconds. Suddenly, rather than going to the usual menu screen, I was already in the game, in a previous save file, which was odd, as I was expecting all the cards to have been wiped by the poor battery. Either way, I wasn't complaining, as I would have chosen the continue option to see what the previous guy did anyway. First off, I checked his trainer information. His name was just ... He didn't have much originality. I checked his profile, and apparently he had 999 hours, 99 minutes put into the game, with all 16 badges, 99,999 Pokédollars, and all 251 Pokemon in the Pokédex. Seeing as he apparently had a Mew and Celebi logged also, I am guessing he either used a Game Genie or was a really hardcore Pokemon player back then. I checked his Pokemon to see what a badass team he has. To my surprise, I saw 5 unknowns and a 6th Pokemon named Hurry. I'm thinking that must be some cruel joke by the person who last played this game, but I decided to check the profiles of the Pokemon anyway. As expected, they were different letters of unknown, all level 5. I was a bit shaky with my unknown alphabet at the time, but I identified the word spelled out to be leave. As for the 6th Pokemon, it turned out to be a Cyndaquil. Mind you, this was before there were individualized Pokemon icons. The Cyndaquil looked normal, but was level 5 with only one hit point left with only 2 attacks, Leer and Flash. I don't know why they named him Hurry, but at the time I just disregarded it. The most eerie thing was that, despite my volume being at max, none of the Pokemon had said their usual cries, just pure silence. Having enough of the team, I closed it. I was parked at what appears to be a room inside Bellsprout Tower. However, for some reason, there were no NPCs around. Even more eerie was that the pillar in the middle didn't move at all, as if just leaning on its side. There was no music at all, and there was no exit or ladder, or at least I thought there wasn't. I walked around for a few minutes, but can't seem to find a way out. This is certainly not a room I've seen in Bellsprout Tower before. I tried checking my items for an escape rope, but the bag was completely empty. There wasn't any wild Pokemon either. Finally, I managed to find a ladder, which turned out to be behind the pillar. The screen turned black, and the music finally started playing. I had a sudden chill as I recognized that melody I heard there to be the theme you hear when you listen to the radio at the Alph Ruins where the Unknown are at. I immediately realized that it wasn't a loading transition, but rather I was in a dark room and would need flash. Before I took care of that, though, I immediately checked my Pokégear to change the radio to something more pleasant. But it turns out that there was no radio card or even a phone nor time cards. There was only a map card in which Gold, ... from earlier, and I will call him Gold from now on, was just walking in a midst of black. I recall that Cyndaquil has flash, so I turned off my Pokégear and made Cyndaquil use flash. I didn't see any message saying Hurry has used flash or anything like that. The room just became lit just like that, and I soon regretted it. The room was a chilling blood red, with a linear gray path heading south. The ladder I used to go up and down was not there at all. I had no choice but to head south. The screen got darker every 20 steps I made until I finally made it to the end, which appears to be a sign. I read the sign which said, "Turn back now." Suddenly I was asked to answer yes/no, but there was no question. There was no question asked. I chose yes, as I do not know what it was asking, and the screen went black again, making a ladder climb sound. The unknown radio music stopped and in a few seconds was replaced with the not as creepy Poké-Flute radio music. I was in another dark room, but I held my breath and used flash again. Suddenly it said, "Hurry has fainted," which was odd, since I recall there was no status condition like poison on him, and I clearly wasn't in a battle. Checked my Pokemon quickly, and suddenly he's no longer in my party. In fact, after a bit of investigating, none of my Pokemon are there, but instead replaced with level 10 Unknown. I did the same thing as before and spelled out the Unknown. My then team of Unknown spelled, "He died." Either way, after that creepy change, the room was lit to reveal myself in a very small room that appears to be only 4 squares big. The wall of that room were gray bricks, as if I was inside something that was hollowed out. Outside that room appears to be a bunch of graves similar to the ones in Pokemon Red/Blue. I walked around in that small room and pressed A, but nothing happened. I've already concluded that this was clearly a hacked game, and some sadistic fuck sold it to GameStop. However, my curiosity kept me going. I checked the trainer profile of ... again, only to find out that the sprite of Gold was missing his arms. He also seems to appear less smug, but rather seems more sad and empty in a way I do not know how to describe. For some reason, it also now said they had 24 badges, which was clearly impossible. After a few minutes of aimless wandering, my character suddenly spun and did the escape rope spinning animation. Instead of flying up, though, my character spun downwards slowly, as if sinking. After that screen, the music stopped. After finally landing, the overworld sprite of Gold is colored differently now. Instead of the usual red color he dons, he appears completely white now, including his skin. It's as if he came straight from the colorless Game Boy games placed into a colored background of the Game Boy Color. I checked his profile, and now is as white as his overworld sprite, he lost his legs and has what appears to be bloody tears from his eyes. It also says he now has 32 badges, which now starts to disturb me, as this change of number seems to represent something important. I also checked my Pokemon, which this time contains 5 unknowns and a level 100 Celebi without a nickname. The unknown this time leveled 15 and spelled out dying. I checked the Celebi's profile. It was a shiny Celebi, except there's only half of the sprite. 1 leg, 1 arm, 1 eye. It only has 1 attack. Perish Song. The area I was in itself was the Sprout Tower with the immobile pillar as before, except everything is apparently red now. I walked north for what felt like forever. Eventually, I finally encountered some generic men and women NPC. They were all lined up to the side, just facing the long slantish pillar in the middle. They were also white, and nothing happens when I try to speak to them. I kept on going north until eventually the pillar finally appears chopped off, with a transparent red in that spot. I went up to red, and without even pressing A, I was suddenly engaged and finally in a battle. The music starts again, which sounds like the unknown radio music again, but played backwards. Gold's battle back sprite matches his front one with the bloody eyes, white skin, and lack of arms, while Red's sprite has the same as before in GSC, except transparent. The text simply said, "Wants to battle," as if he has no name, and both of us only have one Pokemon each, which is weird as I swore I had 6 with the unknowns. My shiny Celebi came out, conveniently with a half a sprite for the back sprite also. The shiny noise and animation was different, as the sounds it made sound like multiple screech attacks used consecutively. Red sent out a seemingly normal male Pikachu, except he is level 255 and his sprite seems sad and has tears in his eyes. Rather than the usual fight item Pokemon run menu, I was only given the option to use the attacks. Since Celebi only has one, I chose it. Naturally, since Pikachu was level 255, he went first. Pikachu used Curse, lowering his speed and increasing his other stats. I'm not even sure if Pikachu could use Curse. Celebi used Perish Song. In 3 turns, both Pokemon get KO'd. Not like I have a choice. At this point, it didn't even go back to the fight menu, as the battle just continued without me. Also, note that there were no animations at all for some reason. Pikachu used Flail, which didn't do much damage despite his level and boost to as his health was maxed. Celebi used Perish Song. Nothing happened as it was already used. Pikachu used Frustration, which did a shit ton of damage, knocking Celebi down to less than 10 hit points. Celebi used Pain Split, which surprised me as Celebi didn't even have that attack in the first place. Now Celebi and Pikachu have about 150 hit points. Pikachu used Mean Look. Not like that did anything. As expected, due to the effects of Perish Song, my Celebi fainted. Except in the text, it said, Celebi has died, and instead, the ordinary drop-off the screen animation, the Celebi back sprite just vanished. For some reason, the Pikachu was still up, even with Perish Song, and it didn't count as my loss. Pikachu used one more different attack beyond the 5-attack limit. Pikachu used Destiny Bond. Afterwards, it said, Pikachu has died, with a slow fade-out animation. Apparently, I was the winner, as the transparent red sprite showed up and said, ... At that point, I just freaked out, as the transparent red sprite was suddenly beheaded, leaving nothing but his transparent body. The battle then ended at that point and faded out along with the music. I'm back in the overworld with another change to the gold sprite. He's now as transparent as Red's overworld sprite. I quickly checked Gold's profile, where this time the only thing remains of him is his head, with a transparent skin. The head was zoomed in a bit, showing a black void in his eyes. It now stated that he now has 40 badges. I then backed out and checked my Pokemon. They were all level 20 shiny unknown, which when spelled out read no more. I was at what I now know is next to the end. There was apparently no music playing, but for some reason I still felt like something was there that could be heard. I was back in my room in New Barktown. Maybe finally I get to play this game properly, but who am I kidding? I knew that sadistic fuck must have done something. I walked around my room to interact with things, as I'm a bit afraid to go down the stairs to see what was awaiting down there. Note I said walked, as while the background was moving, Gold was not moving his transparent limbs at all while doing so, just floating like those ghosts you see in Diamond/Pearl. As expected, the radio, the computer, and TV did not work, so I had no choice but to go down the stairs. I ended up in the same lower-level room of my house. Everything appears normal, except Mom isn't home. After failing to interact with anything in this room, I decided to go outside. To my surprise, that door leading outside at the south didn't work, and instead I just walked straight through it to a void. I continued moving south to see what the fuck was going on. My house vanishes as I head south into the void. It was creepy as when I entered the void, the outline in Gold's transparent sprite turned white to contrast with the pitch black. Eventually, I reached a white area and Gold's sprite turned black and transparent again. I continued south without thinking of stopping at all. After a long trek south, I finally encountered something. It was Gold's regular sprite. I talked to it. He said, "Goodbye forever. ... notably with a space in between the forever and the ... and vanished. As that happened, it said, ? Used nightmare, which at that point, I would not deny that being possible. Gold did another escape rope animation, spinning slowly downwards like before. I'm now back into that small hollowed out room surrounded by graves earlier. Or at least I say I was back there, as there's no sprite anymore. I tried to walk around, but nothing moved, not even wall bumping noise. I checked my trainer profile with absolutely no gold sprite left. It said I have 0 badges, and that all the pictures of the Johto gym leaders at the bottom were replaced with skulls. I checked my Pokémon, which were all level 25 unknown. As expected, it spelled out a phrase that I dared to read. I'm dead. As soon as I went back to the overworld, the room I supposedly was in was then covered up with the same blocks as the walls. I then figured out what exactly that room was when the final text was said, R.I.P. ... That room was a big grave, surrounded by other graves. Gold has already been dead. He died presumably a few years after he defeated Red. He was a young trainer who, despite his efforts in collecting so many badges and attempts at becoming a Pokemon Master, was still unable to avoid the inevitable fate of death, and his efforts were eventually forgotten by the next generation. I was unable to escape from that text no matter what I pressed. I tried resetting the game, and the same thing happened, at which I then finally decided to give up on that horrible nightmare. After that experience, I will never look at the gimmick unknown the same way again. They say that only the first generation have folktales and legends, but the second generation have showed me how unpleasant the truth can be. I eventually enjoyed Soul Silver immensely, but I still can't unthink what that rigged game has told me.
So there's a lot to unpack here.
They had very low standards back then in terms of creepypasta.
I will not lie. Every single time something got spelled out with the unknowns, like I'm dying, I'm dead, or something like that, I actually laughed.
There is an afterword to this, if you didn't know.
Yeah?
Is there?
In September of 2010, somebody made a working fan game of Lost Silver.
Oh my goodness! Of course they
That is
did.
dedication.
Yeah, I know.
I love how
Especially
I
for
can
such a
hear-
terrible story.
I love how I can
Back
hear in
in
your
my
narration
day.
that after the first flash was used, I could hear when your voice went from like, okay, now my incredulity is lost.
I was
Back
trying.
in my day.
I was trying to give it the benefit of the doubt, but it just got so stupid.
We only had 3.5 creepypastas, and 2 of them was written on rocks. And when you wanted to share them with a friend, you had to throw the rock at him.
What's
Or
the last pasta? Is it creepy or is it pasta?
We only had 3 creepypastas, and they were all about lost media.
Or scary Pokemon games.
And this killer guy didn't have a nose.
I loved the announcer-like quality that you gave to this entire readout. It just really added to the energy.
I was hoping it was going to attempt to be drier than that. It was not. The guy was still trying to elaborate, and he just did not have the vocabulary for it.
You can always tell when they're trying.
He was trying-
How old is this story? He was probably pretty young when he wrote it.
Undoubtedly, it was probably written by a middle schooler.
Yeah.
I mean,
Well,
it was at least
for-
2010. He said that Heart Gold Soul Silver was about to come out, so it was probably around then.
That's a pretty good effort for a middle schooler.
And before you find out it was like a 28-year-old guy, you're just like, oh.
Anachronity says, didn't even get sucked into the game or die. I want my money back.
Well, what?
Also-
Video game creepypastas are hard to make scary. I'm just gonna say that right out.
Also, I think this wasn't a Game Boy story, was it? What console was it for again?
A Game Boy Color.
Game Boy Color, yeah. I don't really take Game Boy Color stories scary. Game Boy regular, yeah. They had some good ones back then.
You're like,
Nice.
those regular Game Boy games were possessed. I mean,
Yeah.
I can give you
They're the sequels.
I can give you I can give you a Game Boy, an original Game Boy creepypasta in one sentence. You ready?
Mhm.
The battery lifespan.
Oh,
Gas.
too spooky. Gotta leave. Sorry. It's been great, guys.
Anachronity.
So I think I
Anachronity
have a
says
ghost.
I could write a good video game pasta.
Oh, ho, ho, ho.
I think I have a ghost in my apartment. My lights are flickering.
Oh no.
Oh.
Um,
Oh shit.
So that's interesting. So if I go bloop at any point, that's what happened.
Okay.
okay.
The thing
Okay.
See,
about
I would have
Get the salt.
assumed.
Get the salt.
the thing about
sure you
video
have
game
flashlight batteries.
creepypasta. Yes. The thing about video game creepypastas is that a lot, especially early on, a lot of them just relied on people who were reading them to know exactly what to envision when they were talking about the game. So you don't really need to elaborate at all on anything. And it's like, that's itself is supposed to be spooky because it's deviating from what you expect.
Yeah,
That's
that was
it.
part of my issue with this one because I never played this game. So I'm like, okay, that means nothing. To
I
me.
did play
That
the
means
game,
nothing
and
to
it
me.
still barely meant anything to me.
Not only that, though, how are you going to make up the story if you haven't even played the game? Yeah.
Ah, well.
This is, I
So,
think you should write your own creepypasta. That's what Dogman is.
Yeah, I'm
That's
working
what
on it.
Yeah, it's a creepypasta with horny furries. What more could you possibly ask
He's got
for?
a trilogy to finish first, and then we get the religious creepypasta
With horny furries.
Yeah,
with horny furries, of course.
Yes. Can't leave that part out. It is vital to the experience, specifically my experience.
Hmm.
Just your experience.
yes, it is Stoker's turn.
Oh, goody. So, I decided to get something nice and copyright free. This story is public domain, or should I say, public domain. It seems like every year on Halloween I have to do
Huh?
at least.
What does that mean?
It means something spooky. Seems that every year
terrifying.
I know. On Halloween, I have to do at least one Edgar Allan Poe reading, so I'm filling the quota, the POTA, this year by submitting for the approval of the Midnight Society the facts in the case of M. Valdemar by, of course, Edgar Allan Poe. Of course, I shall not pretend to consider it any matter for wonder that the extraordinary case of M. Valdemar has excited discussion. It would have been a miracle had it not, especially under the circumstances. Though the desire of all parties concerned to keep the affair from the public, at least for the present, or until we had farther opportunities for investigation, through our endeavors to effect this, a garbled or exaggerated account made its way into society and became the source of many unpleasant misrepresentations, and, very naturally, of a great deal of disbelief. It is now rendered necessary that I give the facts, as far as I comprehend them myself. They are, succinctly, these. My attention for the last 3 years had been repeatedly drawn to the subject of mesmerism, and about 9 months ago it occurred to me, quite suddenly, that in the series of experiments made hitherto, there had been a very remarkable and most unaccountable omission. No person had yet been mesmerized in articulo mortis. It remained to be seen, first, whether in such condition there existed in the patient any susceptibility to the magnetic influence. Secondly, whether, if any existed, it was impaired or increased by the condition. Thirdly, to what extent, or for how long a period, the encroachment of death might be arrested by the process. There were other points to be ascertained, but these most excited my curiosity. the last in especial, from the immensely important character of its consequences. In looking around me for some subject by whose means I might test these particulars, I was brought to think of my friend, M. Ernest Valdemar, the well-known compiler of Bibliotheca Forensica and author, under the nom de plume of Issachar Marx, of the Polish versions of Wallenstein and Gargantua. M. Valdemar, who has resided principally at Harlem, New York since the year 1839, is, or was, particularly noticeable for the extreme spareness of his person, his lower limbs much resembling those of John Randolph, and also for the whiteness of his whiskers, in violent contrast to the blackness of his hair, the latter, in consequence, being very generally mistaken for a wig. His temperament was markedly nervous, and rendered him a good subject for mesmeric experiment. On 2 or 3 occasions I'd put him to sleep with little difficulty, but was disappointed in other results which his peculiar constitution had naturally led me to anticipate. His will was at no period positively or thoroughly under my control, and in regard to clairvoyance I could accomplish with him nothing to be relied upon. I always attributed my failure at these points to the disordered state of his health. For some months previous to my becoming acquainted with him, his physicians had declared him in a confirmed phthisis. It was his custom, indeed, to speak calmly of his approaching dissolution, as of a matter neither to be avoided nor regretted. When the idea to which I have alluded first occurred to me, it was of course very natural that I should think of M. Valdemar. I knew the steady philosophy of the man too well to apprehend any scruples from him, and he had no relatives in America who would be likely to interfere. I spoke to him frankly upon the subject, and, to my surprise, his interest seemed vividly excited. I say to my surprise, for although he had always yielded his person freely to my experiments, he had never before given me any tokens of sympathy with what I did. His disease was of that character which would admit of exact calculation in respect to the epoch of its termination in death, and it was finally arranged between us that he would send for me about 24 hours before the period announced by his physician as that of his decease. It is now rather more than 7 months since I received, from M. Valdemar himself, the subjoined note. My dear P., you may as well come now. D and F are agreed that I cannot hold out beyond tomorrow midnight, and I think they have hit the time very nearly. Valdemar. I received this note within half an hour after it was written, and in 15 minutes more I was in the dying man's chamber. I had not seen him for 10 days, and was appalled by the fearful alteration which the brief interval had wrought in him. His face wore a leaden hue, the eyes were utterly lusterless, and the emaciation was so extreme that the skin had been broken through by the cheekbones. His expectoration was excessive. The pulse was barely perceptible. He retained, nevertheless, in a very remarkable manner, both his mental power and a certain degree of physical strength. He spoke with distinctness, took some palliative medicine without aid, and when I entered the room was occupied in penciling memoranda in a pocketbook. He was propped up in the bed by pillows. Doctors D and F were in attendance. After pressing Valdemar's hand, I took these gentlemen aside and obtained from them a minute account of the patient's condition. The left lung had been for 18 months in a semi-osseous or cartilaginous state, and was, of course, entirely useless for all purposes of vitality. The right, in its upper portion, was also partially, if not thoroughly, ossified, while the lower region was merely a mass of purulent tubercles, running one into another. Several extensive perforations existed, and, at one point, permanent adhesion to the ribs had taken place. These appearances in the right lobe were of comparatively recent date. The ossification had proceeded with very unusual rapidity. No sign of it had been discovered a month before, and the adhesion had only been observed during the 3 previous days. Independently of the thesis, the patient was suspected of aneurysm of the aorta, but on this point the osseous symptoms rendered an exact diagnosis impossible. It was the opinion of both physicians that M. Valdemar would die about midnight on the morrow, Sunday. It was then 7 o'clock on Saturday evening. On quitting the invalid's bedside to hold conversation with myself, Doctors D and F had bidden him a final farewell. It had not been their intention to return, but, at my request, they agreed to look in upon the patient about 10 the next night. When they had gone, I spoke freely with M. Valdemar on the subject of his approaching dissolution, as well as, more particularly, of the experiment proposed. He still professed himself quite willing, and even anxious to have it made, and urged me to commence it at once. A male and a female nurse were in attendance, but I did not feel myself altogether at liberty to engage in a task of this character with no more reliable witnesses than these people, in case of sudden accident might prove. I therefore postponed operations until about 8 the next night, when the arrival of a medical student, with whom I had some acquaintance, Mr. Theodore L., relieved me from farther embarrassment. It had been my design originally to wait for the physicians, but I was induced to proceed, first by the urgent entreaties of M. Valdemar, and secondly by my conviction that I had not a moment to lose, as he was evidently sinking fast. Mr. L. was so kind as to accede to my desire that he would take notes of all that occurred, and it is from his memoranda that what I now have to relate is, for the most part, either condensed or copied verbatim. It wanted about 5 minutes of 8 when, taking the patient's hand, I begged him to state, as distinctly as he could, so Mr. L., whether he, as distinctly as he could to Mr. L., whether he, M. Valdemar, was entirely willing that I should make the experiment of mesmerizing him in his then condition. He replied feebly, yet quite audibly, "Yes, I wish to be mesmerized," adding immediately afterwards, "I fear you have deferred it too long." While he spoke thus, I commenced the passes which I had already found most effectual in subduing him. He was evidently influenced with the first lateral stroke of my hand across his forehead, but although I exerted all my powers, no further perceptible effect was induced until some minutes after 10 o'clock, when Doctors D and F called, according to appointment. I explained to them, in a few words, what I designed, and as they opposed no objection, saying that the patient was already in the death agony, I proceeded without hesitation, exchanging, however, the lateral passes for downward ones, and directing my gaze entirely into the right eye of the sufferer. By this time his pulse was imperceptible, and his breathing was stertorous, and at intervals of half a minute. This condition was nearly unaltered for a quarter of an hour. At the expiration of this period, however, a natural, although a very deep sigh escaped the bosom of the dying man, and the stertorous breathing ceased. That is to say, its stertorous was no longer apparent. The intervals were undiminished. The patient's extremities were of an icy coldness. At 5 minutes before 11, I perceived unequivocal signs of the mesmeric influence. The glassy roll of the eye was changed for that expression of uneasy inward examination which is never seen except in cases of sleepwalking, and which it is quite impossible to mistake. With a few rapid lateral passes I made the lids quiver, as in incipient sleep, and with a few more I closed them altogether. I was not satisfied, however, with this, but continued the manipulation vigorously, and with the fullest exertion of the will, until I had completely stiffened the limbs of the slumberer, after placing them in a seemingly easy position. The legs were at full length, the arms were nearly so, and reposed on the bed at a moderate distance from the loins. The head was slightly elevated. When I had accomplished this, it was fully midnight, and I requested the gentlemen present to examine M. Valdemar's condition. After a few experiments, they admitted him to be in an unusually perfect state of mesmeric trance. The curiosity of both the physicians was greatly excited. Dr. D resolved at once to remain with the patient all night, while Dr. F took leave with a promise to return at daybreak. Mr. L and the nurses remained. We left M. Valdemar entirely undisturbed until about 3 o'clock in the morning, when I approached him and found him in precisely the same condition as when Dr. F went away. That is to say, he lay in the same position, the pulse was imperceptible, the breathing was gentle, scarcely noticeable unless through the application of a mirror to the lips. The eyes were closed naturally, and the limbs were as rigid and as cold as marble. Still, the general appearance was certainly not that of death. As I approached M. Valdemar, I made a kind of half-effort to influence his right arm into pursuit of my own, as I passed the latter gently to and fro above his person. In such experiments with this patient, I had never perfectly succeeded before, and assuredly I had little thought of succeeding now, but to my astonishment, his arm very readily, although feebly, followed every direction I assigned it with mine. I determined to hazard a few words of conversation. M. Valdemar, I said, are you asleep? He made no answer, but I perceived a tremor about the lips, and was thus induced to repeat the question again and again. At its third repetition, his whole frame was agitated by a very slight shivering. The eyelids unclosed themselves so far as to display a white line of a ball. The lips moved sluggishly, and from between them, in a barely audible whisper, issued the words, "Yes, asleep now. Do not wake me. Let me die so." I here felt the limbs, and found them as rigid as ever. The right arm, as before, obeyed the direction of my hand. I questioned the sleep-waker again. Do you still feel pain in the breast, M. Valdemar? The answer now was immediate, but even less audible than before. No pain. I am dying. I did not think it advisable to disturb him further just then, and nothing more was said or done until the arrival of Dr. F, who came a little before sunrise and expressed unbounded astonishment at finding the patient still alive. After feeling the pulse and applying a mirror to the lips, he requested me to speak to the sleep-waker again. I did so, saying, M. Valdemar, do you still sleep? As before, some minutes elapsed ere a reply was made, and during the interval the dying man seemed to be collecting his energies to speak. At my fourth repetition of the question, he said very faintly, almost inaudibly, "Yes, still asleep. Dying." It was now the opinion, or rather the wish, of all the physicians, that M. Valdemar should be suffered to remain undisturbed in his present apparently tranquil condition until death should supervene. And this, it was generally agreed, must take place within a few minutes. I concluded, however, to speak with him once more, and merely repeated my previous question. While I spoke, there came a marked change over the countenance of the sleep-waker. The eyes rolled themselves slowly open, the pupils disappearing upwardly. The skin generally assumed a cadaverous hue, resembling not so much parchment as white paper, and the circular hectic spots, which hitherto had been strongly defined in the center of each cheek, went out all at once. I use this expression because the suddenness of their departure put me in a mind of nothing so much as the extinguishment of a candle by a puff of the breath. The upper lip, at the same time, writhed itself away from the teeth, which it had previously covered completely, while the lower jaw fell with an audible jerk, leaving the mouth widely extended, and disclosing in full view the swollen and blackened tongue. I presume that no member of the party then present had been unaccustomed to deathbed horrors, but so hideous beyond conception was the appearance of M. Valdemar at this moment that there was a general shrinking back from the region of the bed. I now feel that I have reached a point of this narrative at which every reader will be startled into positive disbelief. It is my business, however, simply to proceed. There was no longer the faintest sign of vitality in M. Valdemar, and concluding him to be dead, we were consigning him to the charge of the nurses when a strong vibratory motion was observable in the tongue. This continued for perhaps a minute. At the expiration of this period, there issued from the distended and motionless jaws a voice, such as it would be madness in me to attempt describing. There are indeed 2 or 3 epithets which might be considered as applicable to it in part. I might say, for example, that the sound was harsh and broken and hollow, but the hideous whole is indescribable, for the simple reason that no similar sounds have ever jarred upon the ear of humanity. There were 2 particulars, nevertheless, which I thought then, and still think, might fairly be stated as characteristic of the intonation, as well adapted to convey some idea of its unearthly peculiarity. In the first place, the voice seemed to reach our ears, at least mine, from a vast distance, or from some deep cavern within the earth. In the second place, it impressed me, I fear indeed that it will be impossible to make myself comprehended, as gelatinous or glutinous matters impress the sense of touch. I've spoken both of sound and of voice. I mean to say that the sound was one of distinct, of even wonderfully, thrillingly distinct syllabification. M. Valdemar spoke, obviously in reply to the question I had propounded to him a few minutes before. I had asked him, it will be remembered, if he slept. He now said,
Yes. No. I have been sleeping. And now. I am dead.
no person present even affected to deny or attempted to repress the unutterable shuddering horror which these few words thus uttered were so well calculated to convey. Mr. L, the student, swooned. The nurses immediately left the chamber and could not be induced to return. My own impressions I would not pretend to render intelligible to the reader. For nearly an hour we busied ourselves, silently, without the utterance of a word, in endeavors to revive Mr. L. When he came to himself, we addressed ourselves again to an investigation of M. Valdemar's condition. It remained in all respects as I had last described it, with the exception that the mirror no longer afforded evidence of respiration. An attempt to draw blood from the arm failed. I should mention, too, that this limb was no farther subject to my will. I endeavored in vain to make it follow the direction of my hand. The only real indication, indeed, of the mesmeric influence was now found in the vibratory movement of the tongue whenever I addressed M. Valdemar a question. He seemed to be making an effort to reply, but had no longer sufficient volition. To queries put to him by any other person than myself, he seemed utterly insensible, although I endeavored to place each member of the company in mesmeric rapport with him. I believe that I have now related all that is necessary to an understanding of the sleepwaker's state at this epoch. Other nurses were procured, and at 10 o'clock I left the house in company with the 2 physicians and Mr. L. In the afternoon we all called again to see the patient. His condition remained precisely the same. We had now some discussion as to the propriety and feasibility of awakening him, but we had little difficulty in agreeing that no good purpose would be served by so doing. It was evident that so far, death, or what is usually termed death, had been arrested by the mesmeric process. It seemed clear to us all that to awaken M. Valdemar would be merely to ensure his instant, or at least his speedy, dissolution. From this period until the close of last week, an interval of nearly 7 months, we continued to make daily calls at M. Valdemar's house, accompanied, now and then, by medical and other friends. All this time the sleeper-waker remained exactly as I have last described him. The nurse's attentions were continual. It was on Friday last that we finally resolved to make the experiment of awakening, or attempting to awaken him. And it is the, perhaps, unfortunate result of this latter experiment, which has given rise to so much discussion in private circles, to so much of what I cannot help thinking unwarranted popular feeling. For the purpose of relieving M. Valdemar from the mesmeric trance, I made use of the customary passes. These for a time were unsuccessful. The first indication of revival was afforded by a partial descent of the iris. It was observed as especially remarkable that this lowering of the pupil was accompanied by the profuse outflowing of a yellowish ichor from beneath the lids, of a pungent and highly offensive odor. It was now suggested that I should attempt to influence the patient's arm, as heretofore I made the attempt had failed. Dr. F. then intimated a desire to have me put a question. I did so as follows. M. Valdemar, can you explain to us what your feelings or wishes are now? There was an instant return of the hectic circles on the cheeks. The tongue quivered, or rather, rolled violently in the mouth, although the jaws and lips remained rigid as before. And at length the same hideous voice which I have already described broke forth. For God's sake! Quick! Quick! Put me to sleep! Or quick! Awaken me! Quick! I say to you that I am dead! I was thoroughly unnerved, and for an instant remained undecided what to do. At first I made an endeavor to recompose the patient, but failing in this through total abeyance of the will, I retraced my steps and as earnestly struggled to awaken him. In this attempt I soon saw that I should be successful, or at least I soon fancied that my success would be complete, and I am sure that all in the room were prepared to see the patient awaken. For what really occurred, however, it is quite impossible that any human being could have been prepared. As I rapidly made the mesmeric passes, amid ejaculations of "Dead! Dead!" absolutely bursting from the tongue and not from the lips of the sufferer, his whole frame at once, within the space of a single minute or even less, shrunk, crumbled, absolutely rotted away beneath my hands. Upon the bed, before that whole company, there lay a nearly liquid mass of loathsome, of detestable putridity. That's how it ends.
You know what they say, you gotta leave mesmerized sleeping corpses lie. You know?
Yeah. Yeah.
I felt
You can also tell that, like, unlike Lovecraft, Poe actually wrote a scientific paper at some point.
Yes. As a matter of fact, I do believe this one was actually passed off as a real scientific paper upon its first publication.
I could believe that.
He
Sounds
would
like
definitely
fun.
do something like that, yeah.
Yeah. Also, when Lightpaw, when you mentioned that you mix up Poe and Lovecraft on this one, Lovecraft did write a story inspired by this one many years later, so I can see the reason for the confusion.
Curiosity, was it both Lovecraft and Poe's like it is indescribable, it is indescribable? Did they both use that?
I don't think Poe did that as often.
Yeah, Poe
Lovecraft
was
did
still
that a
rooted
lot
in
more.
Gothic.
Lovecraft.
No, Poe was still rooted in Gothic horror. He could describe things.
Lovecraft was listen, Lovecraft had issues. Lovecraft had a subscription. Lovecraft got every issue of the newsletter. But yeah, he one of his bigger problems was that he was self-consciously archaic in his use of dialogue because he had such a boner for the old Gothic writers.
Oh, I can't tell you how many times when I was reading that story, I had to like read the word once and then be like, okay, I know what this word is, and he's just trying to spell it. I'll pronounce it the correct way so people can understand what you're saying.
Yeah, never say demonic when you can say demoniacal, Lovecraft.
I said
this
daemon
with
because daemon is a thing in computers, so...
Yes, well, that's because computers are powered by Satan.
Uh-huh.
And yes, anachronicity, Andy.
That word.
Yes, the Lovecraft one was the air conditioning one. So yes, add air conditioning to the list of things that H.P. Lovecraft is afraid of. All right, are we looping back around?
Yeah, it is GC's turn. We have time for about one more story.
Yeah,
Unless we go longer, it is extra. Well, we're not going to go that long. All right.
it's another short one anyway, but here we
Okay.
go.
DC.
So, with the approval of the Midnight Society, I present to you The Wanderer on the Tracks, written by Gillard McMorith. On Halloween of 1988, 6 teenage boys ventured into a tunnel on a local railroad. Only one escaped with his life in a photo. What resulted from that instant venture was a 2-year period of unexplained murders which killed off a good 10% of my small town's population. To this day, no one knows the true fate of the 5 boys and the reason behind the murders that lasted until the fall of 1990, except for me. I'm the lone survivor. Of the 6 who encountered the Wanderer on the tracks on that dark Halloween of 1988. It was supposed to be a simple dare, nothing to it. Everyone had heard of how every Halloween people head to the tunnels and never come out. We all thought it was bullshit. Then again, we were only 14, not very well learned in the way of the paranormal. All I expected was some crazy dude in the bedsheet. However, what we found was much worse. And what we did made the outcome 10 times worse than it could have been. I guess that curiosity killed the cat really fits when remembering this story. It was me, Steve, my name is Steve by the way, John, Andy, George, Bill, and Fred. Explaining our choice of costume was relevant, but let us note that we all brought flashlights and Andy had brought a bucket to collect the candy in. And foolish Andy, I remember your death so vividly it haunts my dreams this very day, and she does too, but not for long. We all had dinner at John's house as it was close to the tunnel, and after that we played some Super Mario Bros. On his NES to pass the time until it was dark. When it was, we all departed to complete the dare we so foolishly accepted, and I carried a Polaroid to show everyone what was really in the tunnel. We left when it was considerably dark outside, and most of our dads were parading their 7-year-olds up and down the street getting candy before it got really dark. There had recently been some kidnaps in the area, but we didn't expect to meet the suspect, so we thought we'd be safe. With each step towards the tunnel, it seemed as if it got darker, and when we arrived here, it was pitch black. It was pretty much only us and the old trick-or-treaters outside. We all stopped at the entrance of the tunnel for a moment, realizing that we may not make it out alive. After waiting one moment, we hesitantly stepped inside, turning on all 4 flashlights. What's it gonna? Turn on all our flashlights, and no one really wanted to do this. We felt more and more as we went deeper into the tunnels. It was weird though. Usually a tunnel ended about 500 feet, but it seemed like this one went on for miles. We went on for what I would say was another 3,000 feet. Then when we saw it, at the time we had no idea what it was. If we had a choice, I would wish I would never found out what it was and what it did. The fuck is that? Bill asked, half whispering to the rest of us. What we saw looked like a girl that covered herself in dark paint or makeup and had on a plain old nightgown. She was holding what looked like a rod or staff. Her back was facing us. Beats me, Andy shrugged. Hey, he yelled at the thing before throwing the bucket at it. He cleaned off the creature and rolled to the back of the track. Suddenly it made the most gruesome noise in the world as its head rotated 180 degrees to stare back at us. I hastily took out my Polaroid and shot a picture of it. I put away the camera and shook the developing picture before putting it inside my pocket. Everyone was frozen in place looking at the creature, seemingly paralyzed. Soon the creature lifted the rod and threw it at Andy. It was horrifying and amazing, seeing it throw what we now knew was a spear with such dexterity, as well as doing it backwards. The spear struck Andy in the chest, dead center of the sternum. His ribcage collapsed and blood sprayed from the entry into the exit. His spine snapped and he crumpled to the ground. The blood-splattered spear was struck in the ground and a good 40 feet behind us. It was only a moment before we actually fought to run. We didn't even try to save Andy. I turned my head and saw the creature ripping over his chest, tearing muscles, organs apart as our dying counterpart in his death throes. It seemed like the creature wanted to separate flesh from bone, and that is exactly what it had done. Andy's flesh and innards were scattered around the skeletal pool of his blood, and it was coming for the rest of us now. Billy was the next one caught. I eviscerated him the same way as I did to Andy. Then she got George, and then Fred, and it was me and John left. The creature was so close we could feel its putrid breath in our neck. We both heard its demonic growls and screeches. We just barely escaped its furious grabs from our costumes. We kept on running even through the last acid had built up so much in our arms and legs, and our breath was ragged, and we were so damn tired. Soon, we saw the end of the tunnel. Somehow it was morning, which was so illogical, but John and I were just both happy to see the light of day. Suddenly I heard a trip and stumble. John had fucking tripped. We were outside the tunnel, and he tripped. I didn't even need to turn my head to know that he would be gored and gutted, so I just ran a safe distance away before trees came see some trees near my house. His screams echoed through the neighborhood and awoke several families wandering outside to see what happened, and everyone who was outside all saw the creature as it tore John apart. When it was done, it swept its eyes across the shocked citizens of my town and let out a deafening roar that no man or animal could create. It then dashed back inside the tunnel, and everyone ran inside their houses, including me. For 2 years after that, the people who saw the creature were found disemboweled and skinned in their homes. Some people tried to move, but I heard them say it was like they were chained here. The creature was holding everyone here, keeping everyone who had seen it captive in this town. I'm the last surviving person who saw the wander on the tracks, and my time is coming soon. How'd I last so long? I don't know. I bet it's teasing me, torturing me, making me shit my pants every time I turn a corner. It's taken a hold of my life, and I can no longer function like other people. I can no longer go out in the dark. My windows are always closed, the blinds always down, the doors always locked. I tried to kill myself multiple times, but I just can't. It won't let me. Recently, I've been hearing them dying screams of my dying friends, and I hear a bucket clanging from outside my windows, tapping at my front door at night. It's a sign. It's coming for me soon.
Oh.
And then a skeleton popped out.
Spooky, scary skeletons.
Folks.
Down your spines.
The others are jerks.
You know, it's still not midnight. We could probably squeeze in one more really short one if anyone has anything to suggest.
Do you, Miffix?
Anyone can take it if they want to. They don't have to be the one to lead out. for the night, but I do have one prepared if we need to do one more.
Yeah.
What you got?
I've got the Harpy Crow.
Ooh, sounds fancy.
Yeah. There's gonna be this or spiders. Submitted for the approval of the Midnight Society. I present the Harpy Crow by Cyanwrites. All of us had just gotten off of work from various jobs. Call centers, restaurants, offices. One of us even worked for the RSVP, a nature conservation organization. We had all been friends since high school, and through these meetups, our bonds have stayed as strong as they were then. There was a nest of crow hatchlings up a tree near us. They would not stop screaming and screeching for their mom. I turned the conversation to how annoying the little birds were, and the conversation progressed to how we all hated crows. Before long, some of us were heckling them, throwing stones and twigs at the nest to shut them up, me included, with the aim of knocking it down. The only one who wasn't joining in was Gary. He worked at the RSVP. Not only was he angry, he was scared. "Don't hit the nest," he started, surveying the air anxiously. "The wrath and vengeance of a mother crow of that particular species is something incredible. Don't tell me you've never heard of harpy crows." There was a guy who had a nest of harpy crows in his shed. Not knowing how wrathful these beasts are, and thinking them were pests, he put down poison mixed with the bird seed. The crows ate the mix, and all but one of them died. The crow that survived took ill, and the man sought to finish it off with a golf club. They put up an awesome fight, and he even disarmed the man before scratching his face and upper body with the talons. The razor-sharp claws cut through his skin like a hot knife through butter. The man looked up to see its face for the first time. It looked more human than crow. Pale, featherless skin, heavy brow, flat mouth, which it opened to reveal a set of gleaming, jagged teeth. The old man would have had his life taken away then and there if it weren't for the neighbor hearing the commotion and coming to his aid. The neighbor managed to kill the crow before it focused its full attention on him. Both men had been very lucky, the first especially. The rest of us rolled our eyes. In high school, Gary was always telling ghost stories and taking seriously many urban legends and conspiracy theories. None of us knew whether or not the harpy crow was a real species of bird at all, but we all knew the tone of voice Gary used when he was going to explain another full-fledged silly story. "Gary," I interjected before he could get another word out, "nobody cares." And to punctuate my sentence, I threw one more rock at the nest and knocked it clean off the tree. It fell, screaming chicks and all, to the ground with a sickening crunch. Though that wasn't the noise that made me queasy. When the crows got closer to the ground, obviously sensing their death, the screams changed from the cries of hungry baby birds to the cries of frightened children. Frightened, human children. The death of those birds had killed the mood of our meetup entirely. There was now this awkward, melancholy tone settling over all of us. The only one who didn't feel guilty was Gary. He was just flat terrified, eyes still scanning the skies. We all agreed to call it a day, we'd meet up tomorrow, and put this behind us. I walked through the park alone, harrowed and haunted by the sound of those young birds. I couldn't stop those few seconds from replaying it over in my head. It was beginning to get dark as I continued to tread across the grass and under the trees. I heard a fluttering behind me. When I looked over my shoulder, I saw a blackbird perched on a tree quite high up, simply observing me. I shuddered and carried on. The bird could have simply been minding its own business, but I could feel its eyes fixed directly on me. It was watching me. After Gary's little story, the uneasiness couldn't have come at a worse time. I looked back again. I hadn't heard the bird move, but it was now perched on a tree closer to me, and lower down, closer to my level. It's only a bird, I thought. Even if it does attack me with wrath and vengeance, I'll win in a fight against a bird. Even with that mantra in my head, I was getting increasingly freaked out and paranoid. This bird was after me. The mantra disappeared, fading from my mind. The thought of what could happen if it reached me no longer entered my mind, simply that it shouldn't. It couldn't. My breathing became staggered and I quickened my pace. I had to reach home. I would be safe there. I could feel sweat coat my forehead and run down the small of my back. I didn't want to look back again. I didn't. I just wanted to get home. Lock the door and relax in the security of my own personal sanctum. I wanted to laugh off this silly little spell of bird fear that had gripped me heart and soul. I looked over my shoulder. The crow was perched on a branch directly over my head, above where it had been several seconds ago. Now I could see it properly. Its body and wings were coated in feathers so black that looking at it was like peering at a shape carved from a starless night sky. But its face was even more terrible. Its face was a human's face. It was a harpy crow. I stood still, staring at it in wonder, my body not moving even though my brain willed it. The crow was just as still, almost like a statue. The more I looked at its face, the more it looked like my face, except pale. Its small beady eyes devoid of any spark of life or soul, just jet black, like the eyes of any ordinary crow. The crow broke the tense stalemate by moving forward and opening its mouth, bearing razor-sharp rows of teeth. Its mouth was far more horrifying and dangerous than any of Gary's stories could have given it proper justice. I turned and ran. I had to get back home. I had to. My nose was running as I sprinted, and my heart was beating so fast it was causing me pain in my chest, but still, I sprinted. Until my legs protested, until my feet were sore. Relief filled me as I finally reached my front door. I took out my keys, but in my haste and nerves, I couldn't slot the right key correctly into the hole. A large part of me wanted to look behind me as I did this, but my reasoning was thankfully strong enough to stop me. I knew it was right behind me. I could feel it. Finally, I got the door open, bolted inside, closed and locked the door, and collapsed into my armchair. I didn't move for several minutes as my body calmed down. I looked out my lounge window, looking for the harpy crow that I knew had been following me, but it was nowhere to be seen. Maybe it was still in the park. Relieved, I went upstairs in my bedroom and switched my computer on. The curious side of me kept urging me to research more about the harpy crow, but I couldn't. I was beginning to work up a small fever, so I opened the window wide and went back to browsing the web. What I needed right now was distraction. Explanation could wait until I was ready for it. Maybe I'd ask Gary tomorrow if he knew anything else. Nothing else happened until 10 at night. I thought I saw something out of the corner of my eye. Out of the second floor window. Too scared to look and see, I kept my eyes glued to the PC screen, but no amount of distraction could distract my mind from my returning paranoia. I swallowed and mustered up all of my courage, then I turned to the window and shut it in one swift, panicked motion. Nothing. There was nothing out there but darkness. Nothing visible in the window but the reflections of my room, of safety and comfort. I sighed in relief, shut it, and drew the curtain shut, and went to sleep. The next morning, I drew the blinds back, and outside my window, scattered on the ledge, were black feathers. The crow was outside my window last night after all. Then the even more disturbing revelation dawned on me. It wasn't my face's reflection I saw in the window last night.
And now you know the story of how Birdemic began.
We followed all along.
And
Yeah,
now-
this is
now
what
I
happens
actually
when you
recognize
slight
me.
birds and take on a
Yes.
human face and they come after you.
Exactly.
How dare they? How dare they go after crows? Corvids are fantastic. They are the best creatures. I will fight that person myself.
I know, right?
Why
Like, I don't feel bad for this protagonist, like, at all. Like, you were aiming to, like, knock baby chicks out of a tree because they were loud. Not even, like, it wasn't like they were even pestering your workplace or anything. Like, they're in a park that you're going to hang out with your friends at. Like, you could have just left them alone. I do not feel sorry for you in this situation.
Also, my face when he went upstairs and was like, well, I'm safe now. I'm going to open my window and
I
sit
know,
my
right?
back to it.
No, like, it's like immediately the thing that you're like, oh yeah, no, this guy is like such an idiot. Like, he's gonna get it.
I mean, you already knew he was such an idiot from the beginning, but
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, that is some.
The evidence
like,
was just mounting continually.
That's some Darwin Awards level bullshit right there.
Yeah, he fucked around and found out.
I'll do is a great trick or treat from Canada.
Trick or treat, indeed.
He doesn't get any trick or treaters, so I'm going to give him a trick or treat.
Hey.
Yeah, I'm starting to be increasingly concerned every year that trick or treating is a dying tradition.
Can I have some candy? I love a piece of candy. I love Whoppers. They're my favorite.
Oh my god, that is so spot on. You must have like listened to Tilly obsessively or something. That's so good.
Thank you.
Oh. Good times.
Good times.
Alas, it is now November in this part of the world,
yes.
which
That
means
means-
that Halloween is over, and for me, birthday-ween is looming.
The leaves are falling, the books are writing, and then Christmas Santa Claus is coming soon.
Yeah, that one is Santa-ween. It comes right after Turkey-ween.
So,
Oh,
we
that's
were
right,
talking
you guys
about
have
it.
your turkey in November. That's right.
Yeah, it's weens all the way down.
As weens. Today was the big ween.
Today was the biggest ween of the year.
Oh,
No.
wow.
No. You keep Mariah Carey's ass away from this. Not a chance. We held the line.
Okay, you know what?
Yeah.
Actually.
No, this is the actual war on Christmas. Is the skeleton army versus Mariah Carey's thrall.
Hang on.
What's up? Oh no, I don't like this furious typing. I don't like this at all.
Are you gonna find the one of that she posted like last year where it's
No.
her in an ice block thawing?
No. This is I'm simply posting it in the Discord chat. Discord.
dare-
Twitch chat without comment.
Do I dare click it?
Mariah Carey and My Chemical Romance. All right.
Get out. That's great.
This is my Christmas song every year. They work together shockingly well.
All right. Wait. One last question about Halloween Christmas.
Yes.
Is Nightmare Before Christmas a Halloween movie or a Christmas movie?
Yes.
Both is good.
It's a
I'd
November
say-
1st movie.
I'd say Halloween movie.
See, I'm with GC on this. I feel like it's so much more a Halloween movie than a Christmas movie.
Yeah, but
Yes,
it
I agree.
actually has, Christmas stuff happening in it.
Yeah.
Unlike, say, another Halloween Christmas movie, Gremlins, which we watched today.
Well, that's just a straight up Christmas movie. There's no
Yeah,
Halloween in it
exactly.
at all. What are you talking about? That is a family friendly Christmas adventure, which is one of the two movies that led to the creation of the PG-13 rating.
Still forget about that.
It was that and Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, because both of those were given a PG rating by the MPAA, and the parents who came out of them with traumatized children were like, hey, what the fuck?
And then they thought, maybe our system isn't granular enough.
Yeah. I mean, to be fair, it sucks.
Yes, it does. It's still not very good.
It's still not very good.
The eventual TV rating system was a marked improvement, but they haven't changed anything about movie ratings. So
No, they have not. Because I mean, at this point, it's like they're so ingrained in the public consciousness. I don't think that they will change those ratings until the heat death of the universe.
probably not.
All right. Well, it
Oh,
pains me to say this. It pains us to go away like this. But this is the end of our gatherings for this year. You want to thank everyone for coming out. We want to thank all the authors of all the stories we wrote.
We wrote?
Thank
Did we read?
for that we read.
We want to thank all the authors of the stories that we wrote and not you.
Yeah.
I want to thank everybody here in this call and everybody who has joined us for readings. This was a very excellent year. I'm so glad we had so many wonderful guests who came out and joined the main roster as well.
Yes.
The main rooster.
Ooh.
No, that's a
Rooster is
different thing.
completely different.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's true. Sorry, I was feeling a little too cocky with that one.
But cha.
So, Read House Pets, new comic.
Yeah, read House Pets, read Naked Penny if you're old enough.
Thank you all so much. I would like to call this season of the Midnight Society to a close. Good night.
I want to call it a close.
99.
Good night.
Have a good night, everybody.
Bye.
Good
Good night.
night. Sleep tight. Don't let the me bite.
We'll see you next year.
Good night.
Bye.
Bye.
Goodbye.